To feed an expected increase in world population, more food needs to be produced in the next 50 years than we've produced throughout human history. Yet many farmers have no access to modern farming methods, nor any training in how to manage their money. This episode of Food for Thought is all about learning new things, and in cooperation with the United Nations International Fund for Agricultural Development, we go on a journey across 3 continents. To Madagascar, where an elderly woman learns how to double her yield. To Zanzibar, where farmers head back to school to learn how to farm. And to Rome, where Filipino migrants learn how to invest their money. But first, to Moldova, the poorest nation in Europe, where a quarter of the population works abroad. In order to come home, they have to find a way to create more jobs. Planting season in Moldova. Fertile soil and sunshine are among this country's only natural resources. During the Soviet era, Moldovan crops were highly valued. Today, despite more than 20 years of independence, it is now the poorest nation in Europe, and another natural resource fuels the economy. About 1/4 of Moldova's 4.5 million people work abroad, sending money home to sustain families.
The biggest impact has been on the income of communities. Because those people who migrated stopped working in agriculture, revenue collected for local budgets has gone down, and this has had a direct impact on development.
With less money to spend, rudimentary advances are being overlooked in rural communities, where 60% of the population continues to live. Roads are bad. Water is still drawn from wells, and many drive horse-drawn carts. Many villages like Antoneshti are now populated by old people, raising children. When 7-year-old Vladut's parents left to work in Italy 2 years ago, he stayed behind with his grandmother.
Of course, and for us and not only for Vladut it was very difficult. Almost 2 years have gone by since they've left.
Today, Vladut's grandmother can no longer take care of him. 15,000 Moldovan children are in similar situations, according to one government report. Fortunately for Vladut, his cousin has agreed to take him in. Alexandru understands the pressure migration places on families. He spent more than a decade working abroad.
When I worked in Portugal, my daughter Diana, who was very little then, was just learning to say her first words. During one telephone conversation, she said, "If you don't come home, I will hit you." Her words touched me so deeply that I decided to quit my job once and for all and come home.
But coming home meant unemployment. Although remittances make up 1/3 of Moldova's GDP, little is actually invested in business activities or changes that might create jobs. Alexandru had a plan.
When I came home, I did something that was very important to me and quite important to the village. I began designing a system that would supply water to the village.
With support from IFAD, a United Nations agency working to finance job creation in rural communities, Alexandru formed a Water Users Association and began building the network of pumps and pipes that would deliver drinking water directly to village homes.
Without water, our economy could not be developed. But then, when we installed the water tower with support from IFAD, several small businesses started up, which meant new jobs were created.
One of those small businesses is run by Mihai Opre. With a steady supply of water and a small loan from IFAD, he built several greenhouses and now grows tomatoes and cucumbers bound for local markets. Investing in more than 900 new enterprises like this one, IFAD's country program manager, Abdel Karim Sma, says agriculture offers the greatest potential for job creation in Moldova.
We believe that our projects have created about 5,000 jobs directly. These are full-time jobs. The dream of earning a better living and improving your conditions by going outside of village is still prevalent, but we've seen a reverse trend. And we've seen young people coming back thanks to the support of the government as well as donors who are trying to provide incentives.
As Moldovans look toward the future, the idea that tens of thousands of people may soon be coming home to be reunited with their families is appealing, particularly for children like Vladut. From Moldova to the Philippines, another country with a huge migrant population. Now, with some financial education, Filipinos in Rome are making some big investments back home.
The Philippines is a nation on the move. Every year, 1.5 million people leave the country to escape poverty and find jobs overseas. Today, there's an estimated 10 million Filipinos working abroad, who send home more than $20 billion a year. But very little of this remittance money is saved or invested. Most is spent on daily necessities and building more comfortable houses. Here in Mabini, south of Manila, 15% of the population works abroad. It's known as Little Italy due to its transformation by the migrants who now live there. They turned this former farming community into a prosperous-looking village in just one generation. Rolando Paduma works as a doorman in Rome. On a visit home, he says he's proud of the changes.
Now everything's fine here. We have well-built houses. It's not like before. Back then, when the typhoon struck, everybody would be gone.
But everything is not as it appears. Many of these villas are empty. With no one farming here anymore, there are few jobs available, and without money saved, the owners cannot afford to come home.
Before we used to be an agricultural town, but right now I would say that agriculture here is virtually dead. The dependence here became too dependent on foreign remittance. So much so that if there is a crisis in Europe, there is also a crisis here in the municipality of Mabini, Batangas.
This is a great concern for Attica, an organization that works to alleviate the social impact of migration.
It would be very difficult for the overseas Filipinos to be able to come home, return and reintegrate successfully. Because if the family does not have any income, they are just dependent on the remittance. The moment the migrant goes back home, they do not have any income and they do not have any training to be involved in any other enterprises.
Hoping to change the situation, Attica works with the UN's International Fund for Agricultural Development, back here in Rome, to provide financial education courses and investment opportunities for Filipinos. These migrant workers are learning about the benefits of saving and budgeting. They're encouraged to start their own businesses or use their money for long-term investments in agriculture. Flora Ventura and Charito Basa are Filipino workers who took part in the financial education program and are now training others. Both of them have invested in a poultry farm near Mabini. Run as a community cooperative, the farm is financed by over 1,000 overseas workers. The eggs produced are sold in local markets. Investors receive a minimum guaranteed 6% return on their money every year.
This is my very first certificate of investment to the egg layer farm, but I have 2 others at home. When I received my first certificate, I felt I'm economically confident. There's something that gives us some income. It gives us more security of returning home because we won't be a burden to our children and we have something to start with.
Investments like this are not only creating personal wealth, they're creating jobs, which will one day help to make migration a choice rather than a necessity.
From learning how to invest to learning how to farm, these farmers on Zanzibar Island in Tanzania may have been farming for generations, but they've decided to go back to school.
School's in session today in Zanzibar. Zayana Ali Sayed never dreamed she would teach people about farming. Just a few years ago, she battled to earn a living from her own poultry farm. As a widow with 7 children, she relied on her extended family to survive.
Since I joined this group, I am no longer dependent on my family. Now I completely depend on myself.
So what changed? Well, 3 years ago, Zayana joined a farmer field school. And for the first time, she was taught how to farm.
Before, I was getting about 5 or 7 eggs from each hen, but now I get up to 25 eggs.
Historically, Zanzibar Island off the coast of Tanzania was an important trade centre. But the local population benefited little. Still today, the majority of the island's 1.3 million inhabitants are subsistence farmers, and more than half live on less than $1 a day. The government of Zanzibar, supported by the UN's International Fund for Agricultural Development, or IFAD, decided that knowledge was the key to change this.
There was a great need for farmer field schools because majority of our farmers, first of all, didn't go to school. They have very little knowledge locally obtained, and the practices which have been on their farms is just conventional. So there was a gap, and this gap was knowledge-based.
And it's knowledge that's being shared at this farmer field school, one of 720 that have been set up in the past 4 years. The community in each district decides what its needs are, and the project team then draws up a suitable curriculum, bringing together a group of farmers who study through an entire farming season. Nearly 60% of the students are women.
To tell you the truth, I never dreamed I could be such a successful farmer.
And Tamasha has certainly been a success. With her bigger banana yield, she's become the main breadwinner and can now pay her children's school fees and support her husband's dairy farm.
Education opens up the mind of the farmer. Before I started the training, I knew nothing about how to take care of a banana plant. But then I found out it was just like taking care of your child.
Others have taken it a step further. Although some have not finished high school, a number of farmers are conducting their own research.
I feel very pleased to get the chance to contribute my ideas and share my experiences with other researchers to help the poor farmers from my country to earn a higher income and to reduce poverty.
Meanwhile, the knowledge is spreading. When people see their neighbours' success, they form their own farmer field schools. More than 40 self-initiated schools have sprung up, and former students, like Zayana, are being trained to facilitate them. And those who apply what they learn are reaping the benefits. Bunches of bananas have tripled in weight. Rice production has gone up 5-fold. And these bigger yields mean bigger profits.
We will reach a stage whereby 70-80% of farmers are producing surplus food, and that's when we'll come out of poverty.
And with 1,200 farmer field schools planned by the end of next year, this may just become a reality.
And now to another island, Madagascar, where an elderly widow shows us that you're never too old to learn.
Abeline Rizanamami is an elderly widow who lives in central Madagascar. Now 71, she's proud of her independence.
As my son is married, I don't really want to rely on him, since he himself has a family to take care of. I want to be able to look after myself. And anyway, I can still do things for myself.
Abeline maintains her independence by growing a lot of rice, something she learned to do by adopting a technique called the System for Rice Intensification, or SRI.
My rice field is about half a hectare. I know the field is small, but it really produces. It's because I use SRI that the yield has increased a lot. I can do as well as farmers with a hectare or two of land.
The system for rice intensification was developed here in the early 1980s by Father Henry de Laulany, a French Jesuit priest who worked with local farmers. The method relies upon the transplanting of very young seedlings, which are grown in sparsely seeded nurseries. The seedlings are transplanted individually with no tuft and set at precise spaces between each other. The method requires irrigation with a minimum quantity of water and systematic drainage. This field has been planted using the traditional method, and this one on the right was planted at the same time using SRI. Recorded yields have increased from an average of 2 tonnes of paddy per hectare to 8 or even 12 tonnes with local varieties of rice. And now the knowledge is being passed on from farmer to farmer across the country and even abroad, through an initiative financed by the UN's International Fund for Agricultural Development, or IFAD. Abilene too is taking part.
I'm very happy because I really profited from learning myself, so why not teach others? Now in this area, no one is using traditional methods anymore. Everyone is planting in lines today.
The method appears to be catching on. Researchers from Reading University in Britain have estimated that as many as 5 million farmers across the world are now growing rice using SRI.